Why are weak squares so paralyzing in chess? Imagine a battlefield where certain key points are left unguarded and become easy targets for your opponent. That's exactly what happens when weak squares appear on the chessboard. These are squares that your pawns cannot protect, making them vulnerable to enemy pieces. When an opponent places a piece, especially a knight or bishop, on a weak square, it becomes a stronghold, or what players call an outpost. This outpost can threaten your pieces, control important areas, and limit your options. Weak squares are problematic because they take away your control and space. When your pawns can't defend these squares, your pieces lose safe places to go and operate. This often results in cramped positions where your pieces have fewer safe squares to move into. It's like being stuck in a small room with no room to breathe or maneuver. Another issue is that your opponent can use these weak squares to establish strong outposts. Knights are especially good at this because they don't need pawn support to stay put. Once a knight sits on a weak square, it can threaten many of your pieces and make it hard for you to challenge it. This can force you into a defensive stance, trying to dislodge the knight instead of developing your own plans. Weak squares also restrict your ability to push pawns forward. Usually, pawns help control key squares, but if a weak square isn't protected by pawns, you might hesitate to advance your pawns there. Moving pawns into these areas can be risky because it might open up lines for your opponent's pieces or create more weaknesses. This limits your counterplay and makes it harder to free yourself from the pressure. Strategically, weak squares often appear after pawn exchanges or sacrifices that leave holes in your pawn structure. Creating or exploiting these holes is a common plan in the middle game. Players aim to place their own pieces on weak squares to gain long-term advantages. For example, a knight on a well-chosen weak square can harass your opponent's pieces and control key parts of the board. To take advantage of weak squares, players often target them with their pieces, especially knights, to establish outposts. Removing enemy defenders that guard or contest these squares can make it easier to occupy them. Sometimes, players even sacrifice material to create or open up weak squares in the opponent's camp. Controlling these squares can lead to strong attacking positions or better endgame prospects. In essence, weak squares are paralyzing because they create vulnerabilities that limit your options and give your opponent a strategic edge. They allow your opponent to establish dominant outposts and restrict your piece mobility. This imbalance can turn into a lasting positional advantage, making it difficult for you to develop your pieces freely and forcing you into a defensive stance. Recognizing and exploiting weak squares is a key part of middle game strategy and can often decide the outcome of the game.